Oh, hiya, it's Ftrhstry. I'm Kingdangerously. It's a time vortex. We're looking at the 2020s from the 2120s, and we're going to do electric shipping containers today. Well, the boats that are electric and carry them. We're talking about the Yara Birkeland. Bit of an exciting piece of history. In 2021, the Yara Birkeland became the world's first zero-emissions cargo ship. Pretty exciting, completely green, no noxious poisony gases spewing off it. As you may remember, if you're a student of history, in the very olden timey days, green boats were everywhere. All boats were super green. They were just sails. They harvested completely renewable wind as they traversed the world in fits of colonization. But then, after the Industrial Revolution, they just became really nasty. And if you didn't know, boats are like a pretty gunky source of bad emissions in the 2020s. They only make up about 2 to 3% of total emissions in the world, but they are some nasty stuff. I mean, like really gunky, dewy, gooey oil that you would not want to look at, much less have to think about. So it's very exciting that we're moving toward electrification. And the company Yara International has made this happen in collaboration with the Kongsberg Maritime Group and the shipbuilder known as Vard. Vard sounds more like a bodybuilder type, maybe an amateur wrestler. But apparently it's a shipbuilder in Northern Europe, which is a happy place for it because Norway is a country that gets almost all of its power from hydroelectricity. So that means that when this 7 megawatt hour battery charges up on the Yara Birkeland, it does so primarily from the wind. I mean, the water, from nature magic. And it then toodles up and down the Norwegian and other European coasts entirely autonomously. Would say that was a burial of the lead, except it's not really the most interesting part of the story. Autonomous technology is everywhere where I'm from in the 2120s, and it's, just getting born where you're from, depending on how presently you're watching this and how much you're a student of internet history. In as much as you might be watching this later from some faraway archival storage situation, like, I don't know, the end of the universe, just catching up on the highlights, like that time that Kingdangerously talked about the Yara Birkeland. All right, back to the good shit. Ooh, oh, I'm so sorry. The good things? It's important to know that the world's economy in the 2020s moves around 11 billion tons of stuff on the ocean. That's a lot of stuff. And it, of course, makes use of the flotation of the ocean to make that relatively energy efficient. But it's still a pretty heavy draw on the world's power sources, and it spews a bunch of gunk into the air, which is not ideal. These ships get really big. The Yara Birkeland is going to carry about 100 shipping containers, but it goes into the thousands. I mean, the really big monsters. So I did some back-of-the-envelope calculations, and the Yara Birkeland, which cost 25 million to build, would need to be replicated 3 to 4 million times over to solve the world's problems with gassy ships. And that would cost somewhere in the region of $10 quadrillion. So that's a bit more than is on the table in the immediate offing for the 2020s, since the whole world, or the economy, monetarily in the 2020s only totals to about 80 trillion annually. It's a lot of money to you and I and our automated companions, but of course it's a bit of a tiddlywink compared to the economy of 2120s, which we'll talk about some other time. But it's much more, to put it lightly. What else can I tell you before we hop into the future? The first voyage will be between Herøya and Breivik. Gotta love the Norwegian names. Not entirely sure I'm pronouncing the zero with a slash through it correctly. Heroia? Beautiful places though, I'm told. I hadn't visited them as of the 2020s, but of course now here in the 2120s I'm telling myself that they're beautiful because I've been many times. What else do you need to know? 13 knots. It tops out at 13 knots, which is about 15 miles an hour. So you could run alongside the Yara Birkeland if you wanted to. And that seems slow, but it's actually pretty good for freight across the water because there's sort of a diminishing returns as you go much lower than that, and an exponentially bad situation as you go higher than that because of the physics of transporting stuff through water. Moving faster requires disproportionately more power, and that sort of bottoms out in the 12 knot range. So 13 is pretty much a sweet spot. Much below that you're not getting extra savings really, you're just sort of slodging around at the bottom of the spectrum. So that's a pretty good number for efficiency. And we should note that in the 2020s a lot of shipping companies have already increased the efficiency of their craft through measures like slowing down and some of them installing rotor sails which can pick up wind as they're going across the oceans. Where is it going, we might well ask, right? Let's talk about the future of electric cargo shipping, shall we? Hopping through the rest of the 20s, it's still pretty dirty is the headline. Lots of really cool new tech, but like not a lot of it in full-on action. These ships have like a 20 to 30 year lifespan, so it's going to take a while to kind of move the needle here. But by the 30s, some non-zero percentage of the world's fleet is electrical, and late in the 30s and early in the 40s, that's a sizable percentage, which late in the 40s and early in the 50s will pass the tipping point of more than half of the fleet being electric and therefore fully renewable and therefore not spewing nitrous oxides and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere to be breathed chokingly by all. And that's pretty great. But then later in the century, new technologies come along to take it the rest of the way to get to 100% renewable fleet. And those technologies include localized fusion engines, which are not quite possible yet. We don't even have, in the 2020s, you don't even have sort of factory scale fusion, but in the 2050s, it's available on a smaller scale and it gets deployed in some shipping applications. And then also in the back half of the 21st century, which century is it? Again, yeah, I'm in the 22nd, right, and we're talking about the 21st. And the 21st century builds toward a crescendo of space solar being like a major source of energy. And space solar solves a lot of the shipping problems because you can just beam a microwave ray down from the space solar collection arrays and nudge the little boats around the ocean. In some places, industrial artificial intelligence allows for the creation of what you might call ocean rail systems, which are essentially like a cable car situation where boats float, but they're connected to a wire and they draw power for their electric engines off of that wire. And then I guess the final question would be where does it all land in the 2120s? Where I am, there's still a surprising amount of stuff in the water. You would think that based on various sci-fi timelines, everything would be flying by then. But the brute reality is that it's just cheaper to move things if they're already floating. If you have to lift the stuff off the ground first, it just costs more from an energy and therefore money perspective. So it's always going to be better to move it across the water until we get like really godlike cheap energy, and that's a ways off. So by the 2120s, everything is electrified in terms of cargo shipping on the water, and that's very good news. And you can thank the Yara Birkeland for starting off that party in 2021. So congratulations, you live in a very special time, and I hope you go on to research some interesting vessel physics. Perhaps you'll be the person who invents the space solar microwave array. that moves boats across the water with the sun instead of, as the ancient days did, the wind. All right, love you. Do something nice for yourself tonight, and we'll see you in some other time than this.